Adrian Holt had it all. The kind of wealth that made the world bow at his feet. His name opened doors that others could only dream of. His presence commanded silence in boardrooms. And his fortune stretched so far across continents that his family was spoken of like royalty. But none of it filled the emptiness that haunted him when the lights went out. Behind his tailored suits, sprawling mansions and private jets, Adrian carried a secret ache, the kind no empire could fix. His life was carefully curated, every move watched by a family obsessed with legacy. To them, love wasn't a matter of the heart, it was a transaction. They had already chosen the woman he was supposed to marry, one who came with political ties and business advantages. A perfect arrangement, they called it. But Adrian's heart was restless. It longed for something real, something money couldn't buy. And then she walked into his world. Her name was Sweary Blake. She wasn't from his world of power and privilege. She didn't wear diamonds or glide into rooms with entourages. She carried herself with quiet grace, her beauty striking not just in the curve of her smile or the softness of her eyes, but in the strength she exuded. She was the kind of woman who could silence a room without ever raising her voice. Their first encounter wasn't meant to happen, it was a twist of fate. But the moment their eyes met, Adrian felt something he had never known before. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, as though his soul had been starving, and suddenly she was the only thing it craved. He tried to resist. He told himself she wasn't his, couldn't be his, but the forbidden only made her more irresistible. Every stolen glance set his pulse racing. Every accidental brush of her hand against his sent heat surging through him. Conversations that should have been polite turned into confessions whispered in the dark. And when she laughed, oh, when Sweary laughed, it was as though the walls around Adrian's heart crumbled piece by piece. But theirs was a love that could destroy everything. For Adrian, loving her meant defying his powerful family and risking the empire he was destined to lead. For Sweary, giving in to him meant sacrificing her future, her peace, and possibly her freedom. They weren't supposed to cross that line. She wasn't supposed to be his, and yet, neither of them could let go, because sometimes the heart doesn't follow rules. It doesn't care about contracts, families, or empires. It only knows when it has found its missing piece. So here is their story, of love that burned too brightly to be hidden, of passion that refused to be silenced, of a forbidden bond that threatened to change everything. But the question remains, when the heart defies rules, who pays the price? Before we begin, thank you to all our returning viewers and a warm welcome to our new ones. If you love stories of romance, passion, and life lessons, please make sure to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to Mr. Leonardo Stories so you don't miss the next chapter. Now, lean in, because Adrian and Sweary's love story is about to begin. Adrian Holt's mornings began the same way every day, with the soft click of glass doors opening onto a private balcony that overlooked the city. From the 48th floor of his penthouse, the skyline stretched endlessly, a sea of silver towers cutting into the sky. The world called it power. He called it a prison made of glass and steel. Every corner of his life gleamed with excess. His suits were custom-tailored in Milan, his watches rare collector's pieces worth more than most people's homes. He was photographed at galas, invited to every exclusive boardroom, whispered about in financial circles as if he were a living legend. But what no one saw, what no one wanted to see, was how lonely power could be when it came without love. His father had always told him, wealth is legacy, love is distraction. His mother echoed it, reminding him that the Holt name carried obligations. Marriages weren't for affection, they were for alliances. Theirs had been such a union, a merger of fortunes and reputations. They expected the same from him. And so they had chosen a woman. Beautiful, polished, acceptable by every societal standard. She came from a family whose business interests aligned with theirs. To his parents, she was perfect. To Adrian, she was a stranger he could never imagine giving his heart to. At dinners, she spoke of investments and charity balls, her laughter light but empty, her eyes never quite meeting his with warmth. Adrian felt nothing. No spark, no pull. Yet his parents pressed harder each day. Marry her, secure the empire, cement the Holt name. But at night, when he stood alone in his silent penthouse, Adrian wondered what all his wealth was worth if his heart remained chained. He thought of how the world envied him, his sprawling estates in Europe, his yachts, his jets, his very name. Yet he would have traded it all for something simple, the feel of a woman's touch that wasn't measured in social advantage, the kind of kiss that left him breathless, not because of scandal, but because of love. Adrian's world was one of constant scrutiny. Every movement was analyzed, every headline dissected. He was not allowed to make mistakes, not allowed vulnerability. To the outside world, he was untouchable. Inside, he was a man quietly suffocating under the weight of expectations. And it was in that loneliness that the cracks began to show. He started to crave freedom in small ways, ignoring a scheduled appearance, spending hours in the library of his estate, losing himself in stories of men who chose passion over power. Some nights, he would drive alone, without chauffeurs, without guards, just to feel what it was like to exist without a script. But freedom never lasted long. His family always reeled him back in, their voices sharp reminders of what was at stake. "Don't forget who you are," his father said one evening after a board meeting. His tone was more warning than advice. Adrian had looked him in the eye, his voice even but edged with quiet rebellion. "I haven't forgotten who I am. I just wonder if you've forgotten I'm more than a name." His father's jaw had tightened, his silence louder than words. It was moments like those that reminded Adrian of the invisible chains he wore. Chains made not of iron, but of duty, tradition, and wealth. And yet, even in that suffocating world, a restlessness stirred, a longing he couldn't silence. He didn't know it then, but fate was already moving pieces into place, pieces that would lead him straight to Sweary Blake. The Holt estate outside the city was a world of its own. Acres of manicured lawns stretched endlessly, fountains sang in perfect rhythm, and staff moved silently through marble halls as if choreographed. On the surface, it was paradise. To Adrian, it was another gilded cage. Even at home, he wasn't free. Family dinners weren't about togetherness, they were negotiations. His mother sat at the head of the long mahogany table, pearls shining against her throat, her eyes sharp as she surveyed him. "Adrian, have you given more thought to Clarissa?" she asked one evening, her tone sweet but her words carrying the weight of command. Clarissa, the woman chosen for him, beautiful, yes. Elegant, yes, but hollow to him, like a perfectly wrapped gift that hid nothing inside. Adrian swirled the wine in his glass, watching the deep red cling to the rim. "Mother, I've told you, I'm not ready for marriage." His father's voice cut in, deeper, firmer. "It's not about readiness, it's about responsibility. The Holt Empire doesn't wait for your feelings." Adrian set his glass down with a quiet clink. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. There was no point. In their eyes, his heart was irrelevant. He was not a man. They saw him only as an heir, a tool for legacy. After dinner, he often retreated to the library, one of the few places he could breathe. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with leather-bound books surrounded him, the smell of old pages soothing. He would run his fingers along the spines of stories that whispered of freedom, passion, choices made for love instead of duty. One night, he stopped at a worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. He opened it, scanning passages of loss and longing, and wondered if he too was a prisoner, though his cell was gilded with gold. Wealth gave him everything but peace. He tried distraction. Business consumed him, board meetings, financial reports, international deals. To outsiders he was flawless, a man in control, decisive, brilliant. Inside, he carried exhaustion that no one dared ask about, and still the pressure never eased. His father's words echoed constantly, "Your marriage is the empire's next deal." Adrian wondered if his parents ever loved each other, or if their union had been just another contract. Did they even remember what it felt like to look at someone and feel their world tilt? He ached for something he had never truly known, for intimacy that was more than physical, for connection that wasn't calculated. He wanted a woman whose presence silenced the noise of the world, who saw him, not the fortune attached to his name. But in the Holt household, such desires were forbidden indulgences. On his loneliest nights, Adrian found himself staring out across the city, lights glittering like diamonds against the dark. Millions of people lived out there, free to love, free to choose. He, with all his billions, felt poorer than they all. And so he sought moments of rebellion in the smallest acts. He would escape in his car, alone, driving fast down coastal roads with the wind roaring against him. No chauffeurs, no guards, no expectations. Just Adrian, the man, not Holt the empire. Sometimes he would stop at quiet diners, places where no one recognized him. He'd sit in a corner booth, listening to laughter that wasn't forced, to conversations untainted by power. For a few fleeting hours, he could pretend he was ordinary. But dawn always came, and with it, the weight of his name. His chains were invisible, but they were heavy. And though he didn't know it yet, fate was preparing to test every link in them. Because soon, very soon, Sweary Blake would step into his carefully controlled world, and nothing would ever be the same. Adrian's days bled into each other like a routine scripted by someone else. Sunrise at the penthouse gym, breakfast meetings with investors, afternoons spent in boardrooms where polished voices spoke of numbers and markets but never of dreams. By evening, there were charity functions or exclusive gatherings where smiles were painted on like masks, champagne flowed, and nothing ever felt real. Women smiled at him, draped in silk and jewels, their eyes gleaming with ambition. They touched his arm, leaned too close, whispered promises they thought would entice him. But Adrian had learned to see through the performance. They didn't want him. They wanted Holt, the billionaire, the name that opened doors. None of them reached the man beneath the suit. It left him numb. One evening, Clarissa, his parents' chosen bride, joined him at a gala hosted by an international bank. She was flawless, every detail of her attire perfected by stylists. Her laughter rang like crystal as she charmed executives, her hand looped elegantly through Adrian's arm. To the cameras, they looked like a couple destined for power. To Adrian, she was a stranger wearing his family's approval. When she leaned close, whispering, "We'll make quite the empire together," he forced a polite smile. Inside, he recoiled. Her words weren't of love, of warmth, of home. They were of conquest, business, legacy. She didn't see him. She saw an empire she hoped to command. As the night stretched, Adrian slipped away from the golden ballroom, stepping out onto the terrace. The city glittered below, alive, chaotic, beautiful in its imperfection. For a fleeting second, he envied the people in the streets, laughing with friends, holding lovers close, living without expectation. Behind him, his father's voice intruded. "She's perfect for you. Don't squander this, Adrian. The family needs you to see reason." Adrian turned, his jaw hard. "Do you even care if I'm happy?" His father's silence was answer enough. Happiness wasn't part of the Holt blueprint. Back in his penthouse later that night, Adrian poured himself a drink. The glass clinked softly against the marble counter as he stood in the quiet. His reflection in the window stared back at him. Handsome, powerful, yet empty. He thought of the hollow conversations, the lifeless smiles, the chains that bound him. He longed, not for wealth, not for alliances, but for the warmth of someone who touched him not because of his empire but despite it. He wanted laughter that wasn't calculated, a kiss that wasn't currency, intimacy that wasn't scripted. Sometimes, in the dead of night, he imagined what it would feel like to wake up beside someone who loved Adrian the man, not Holt the billionaire. To reach across the sheets and find comfort, not expectation. But every morning, reality returned. Staff entered, schedules were presented, and meetings filled his day. He played his role flawlessly, the perfect heir, the perfect son. Only he knew that inside, he was unraveling. The world envied him, but envy was blind. And so Adrian drifted, a man of wealth with a heart starving for connection. He didn't yet know that the universe was moving quietly in his favor, preparing to bring into his life the one woman who could shatter the chains he wore. Her name would soon be on his lips, Sweary Blake, and with her would come everything he had secretly prayed for and everything he had been warned to fear. The night was restless. Adrian sat alone in the penthouse library, a glass of bourbon untouched beside him. The city glowed beneath the wide windows, alive with lights and laughter, but inside, silence pressed heavily on him. The only sound was the ticking of a vintage clock, a reminder of time passing, of choices closing in. He leaned back in the leather chair, closing his eyes. For years, he had moved through life like a man fulfilling a script written before he was born. Every decision, every smile, every step had been curated by his family's ambitions. And now they were demanding the final act: marriage, legacy, empire secured. But what about him? He thought of Clarissa, perfect, polished, predictable. She represented everything his parents wanted, and nothing his soul craved. Her touch was cold, her kiss empty. Adrian's heart recoiled, even as his family insisted she was his future. He exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. He wanted more. He needed more. Rising, he crossed the room to the balcony. Cool night air washed over him as he gripped the railing, his gaze scanning the streets below. Down there, strangers laughed in cafes, couples strolled hand in hand, lovers kissed beneath lamplight. They had none of his wealth, none of his power, but in that moment, Adrian envied them more than they could ever envy him. For all his billions, he had never known what it felt like to be chosen, not for his name, not for his fortune, but for him. A whisper escaped his lips, low and almost desperate. "Is there someone out there who sees me?" The city didn't answer, only the hum of cars and the faint echo of life below. And yet, deep inside, he felt it, the faint stir of change. A restlessness that was different this time, as though fate itself had begun to shift, preparing to collide his world with another. Adrian didn't know her name yet, didn't know her smile, her voice, her touch. But he would soon, and when Sweary Blake entered his world, she would ignite a fire he couldn't extinguish, challenge every chain he had worn, and force him to choose between duty and desire. For the first time in years, a small, almost reluctant smile curved Adrian's lips. He didn't know why, but tonight felt different, as if destiny was waiting just around the corner. He lifted the untouched bourbon, savoring the burn as it slid down his throat, and whispered to the night, "Whatever comes, I'm ready." But he wasn't, not for her, not for the way she would unravel him, not for the way she would show him that love, real, forbidden, dangerous love, was worth risking everything. Because Sweary Blake wasn't supposed to be his, and yet, soon, she would be the only thing that mattered. Sweary Blake's life was nothing like Adrian Holt's, yet in its own way, it was just as demanding. Her mornings began not with private chefs or assistants, but with the shrill alarm of her modest apartment clock. She lived in a neighborhood tucked away from the gleam of wealth, where life was real, messy, beautiful, and unapologetic. Her two-bedroom apartment smelled of coffee and lavender. The walls bore reminders of her independence, lined with books she had saved, up to buy, photographs of the few people she truly trusted, and notes of encouragement she wrote to herself when life felt too heavy. Sweary had always been a fighter, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She had learned early that nothing in life was handed to her. Her strength wasn't just in her graceful posture or the intelligence in her eyes, it was in the way she carried every hardship with quiet dignity, refusing to let it break her spirit. She had built her career step by step, starting as an intern in a corporate office, climbing through late nights, endless reports, and overlooked contributions. Now, she had carved out a place for herself as a consultant for companies looking to stabilize their crumbling structures. She wasn't rich by any stretch, but she was respected. And more importantly, she was free, free to choose her path, free to live by her own values. But freedom came at a price. Sweary had no powerful family name to protect her. Every achievement was earned, every mistake magnified. And in the high circles she sometimes brushed against in her line of work, she was constantly reminded of her place. Still, she never let it intimidate her. She knew who she was. She knew her worth. That was what made her first encounter with Adrian Holt so unforgettable. It happened on a Tuesday evening, in the middle of what should have been a routine client meeting. She had been brought in by a mid-level executive to consult on restructuring a failing subsidiary of the Holt empire. She wasn't supposed to meet Adrian himself. The billionaire rarely dealt with matters that didn't touch billions. But fate had other plans. Sweary was bent over a set of financial projections in the conference room when the air shifted. A subtle change, like the drop in temperature before a storm. She looked up, and there he was, Adrian Holt. She had seen his face in magazines, on television, on glowing billboards that painted him as the golden heir of power. But in person, he was more than that. Taller than she imagined. His presence filled the room without him saying a word. His suit was cut to perfection, but it was his eyes, stormy grey, sharp yet heavy with something unspoken, that caught her breath. For a moment, she forgot to speak. Her heart stumbled in her chest, and she had to remind herself to breathe. Adrian's gaze swept across the room, indifferent to the others, but when it landed on her, it paused. It wasn't just a glance. It was a study. His eyes lingered, as if he too felt the shift. "Miss Blake?" His voice was low, smooth, carrying an edge that made her spine straighten. "Yes." She cleared her throat, forcing her composure. "I was asked to prepare recommendations for Holt Industries' subsidiary restructuring." He nodded slowly, but his gaze didn't waver. "And what do you recommend?" Sweary held his stare. She wasn't a woman who wilted under scrutiny, not even his. "That your board stops treating human capital like disposable assets. If you want stability, invest in the people who carry your empire, not just the profits." The room went silent. Executives shifted uncomfortably, some glancing nervously between Adrian and Sweary, as if waiting for an explosion. No one spoke to Adrian Holt that way. But Adrian didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. A flicker of something sparked in his eyes. Curiosity, respect, maybe even hunger. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to him without fear, without calculation, without bowing to his name. And that someone was standing in front of him, calm, beautiful, unshaken. Sweary felt the air thicken, the weight of his gaze pressing against her like a hand she couldn't see. She told herself to focus, to remember this was work. But her pulse betrayed her, racing wildly. Adrian gave the faintest nod. Interesting perspective. His lips curved, not into a full smile, but into something subtle, something private. "I'll consider it." And then, just as quickly as he appeared, he turned and left. The meeting resumed, voices stumbling back into motion, but Sweary's thoughts remained tangled. She hadn't expected him to look at her like that. She hadn't expected to feel anything, but she did, and deep down she knew something had shifted. Sweary tried to shake it off. After the meeting, she packed her files with practiced efficiency, reminding herself that Adrian Holt was just another client, just another billionaire with a world too far from hers. But as she walked out of the glass tower that evening, the city lights glaring against the sleek, black cars that lined the curb, she couldn't stop replaying the way his eyes had held hers. It unsettled her, not because she hadn't been noticed by powerful men before, she had, but because Adrian's gaze hadn't been like theirs. It wasn't just interest, it wasn't just hunger. It was as though he had seen her, cut through the layers, and touched the part of her she kept guarded. Sweary told herself she would not think about it again. She had work to focus on, bills to pay, and goals to reach. Men like Adrian Holt belonged to a universe where love was an accessory, not a truth. But fate was rarely so simple. The very next day, she was called back to the Holt offices for a follow-up presentation. She assumed it would be handled by mid-level executives again. But when she stepped into the sleek conference room, her breath caught. Adrian was there, waiting. He stood near the window, city light spilling across his sharp features. He looked untouchable, carved from steel and shadows, yet when his eyes lifted to hers, something softened. "Miss Blake," he said, his voice calm but carrying that undertone that made her pulse trip. "I thought I'd hear your recommendations directly this time." Her throat tightened, but she held her composure. "Of course, I'll walk you through the plan." She moved to the front, laying out her charts and speaking with precision. She explained employee morale, the cost of constant turnover, and the necessity of restructuring with humanity at its core. But even as her words flowed, she felt his eyes on her, watching, measuring, not the data, not the charts, her. When she finished, Adrian said nothing at first. Silence stretched, thick, heavy. And then, finally, he stepped closer. "You're not afraid to tell me what I don't want to hear," he said quietly. His gaze held hers, unblinking. "Most people are." Sweary swallowed. "Maybe they should stop worrying about what you want to hear and start telling you what you need to know." A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "And you think you know what I need?" Their eyes locked. The room felt smaller, the space between them charged. She could smell his cologne, clean, sharp, expensive, yet not overwhelming. It made her light-headed, though she refused to show it. "I think," she said softly, "that you're a man surrounded by people who only say yes. And sometimes what you need is no." His expression shifted. Something flickered in those storm-grey eyes, something that looked almost like relief. For a heartbeat, it was as though he wanted to step closer, to touch her, to let go of the walls he wore like armor. But just as quickly, the mask returned. He straightened, nodding once. "Your work is impressive, Miss Blake. I'd like you to continue with this project. Report directly to me." Her heart lurched. Report directly to him. That meant more meetings, more proximity, more chances for the pull between them to grow. "Understood," she said evenly, though inside, her chest thudded with conflict. As she gathered her papers, she caught his gaze again. It lingered, brief, restrained, but undeniable. When she walked out of that room, Sweary knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. She wasn't supposed to be seen by Adrian Holt. She wasn't supposed to feel the heat that sparked between them. And yet, she did. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the memory of his eyes haunted her. She tried to bury it, tried to convince herself it was nothing. But her body betrayed her, the quickened breaths, the restless ache she couldn't name. Across the city, Adrian stood alone on his balcony, bourbon in hand, staring into the night. He told himself it was business. She was just a consultant, useful, sharp, nothing more. But the truth clawed at him. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Her voice, her defiance. The way her presence made the air taste different. And for the first time in years, Adrian Holt, the man with everything, felt a hunger he couldn't control. The next week, I rewrote Sweary's routine. She arrived at Holt headquarters with her hair swept into a clean, effortless style, neutral blouse tucked into tailored trousers, heels soft against the marble floors. She walked with the calm of someone who had earned her place, files pressed neatly to her chest. When the elevator doors slid open on the executive floor, Adrian was already in the corridor, tie loosened, jacket off, sleeves, rolled just enough to show a forearm watch and the hint of a man who lived in two worlds, immaculate air and restless human. His gaze lifted, as if he'd felt her coming. "Morning, Miss Blake," he said, voice low. "Good morning," she replied, steady. Her pulse wasn't steady at all. They reviewed projections in the glass-walled conference room, sunlight, pooling across the table like a spotlight neither of them had asked for. She spoke. He listened, intense and quiet. Questions precise. Follow-ups tighter than any exec she'd met. When she paused to shift a slide, their hands brushed over the trackpad. It was nothing, and it was everything. The touch lingered like an echo. A manager stuck his head in. "Mr. Holt, the board wants 5 minutes." Adrian's eyes didn't leave Sweary. "Tell them I'll be there in 10. The manager blinked, nodded, vanished. When they were alone again, the room seemed to breathe differently. Adrian's tone softened. "You don't rush what matters. Is that your philosophy?" she teased, careful with the line between playful and inappropriate. For some things, he said. Gaze steady. Yes. She looked down to break the intensity, flipping to a slide about retention. Then don't rush this either. If you cut the training pipeline again, you'll save on paper and bleed in reality. He smiled. Barely. You're relentless. And you're used to people giving up. He held her eyes in a silence that felt close to touch. I'm not used to people seeing me. The air shifted. It would have been easy to look away. She didn't. A soft knock broke it. HR's director slipped in with a thin folder. Miss Blake, could I borrow you for a minute? In a smaller office, the HR director's voice went professional flat. Given your temporary engagement, I need to remind you about the standard non-fraternization clause in your contract. No personal relationships with executive leadership. It's routine. I'm aware, Sweary said calmly. Good. A pointed pause. Eyes are always on this floor. Be mindful. Back in the hallway, she exhaled. This wasn't her first time being warned for rules she never planned to break. Still, the reminder grated, not because of the clause, but because of how her body had reacted to his nearness. She straightened her shoulders and returned to the conference room. Adrian glanced up as she entered, reading her face too easily. Everything okay? Just policy, she said. Then, quieter, boundaries are clear. Something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, frustration, restraint. He nodded once. Understood. They finished the review with professional precision. When the meeting ended, he walked her to the elevator. It was unnecessary and entirely deliberate. He pressed the call button, then spoke without looking at her. I'd like weekly check-ins, early mornings. Fewer people around then. You'll have my full attention. Her breath tugged. I assume that's for efficiency. His mouth quirked. Among other things, yes. The doors opened. She stepped in. He didn't follow. She realized he was giving her space, an offering of control inside a world that took it from people like her. She caught his gaze as the doors slid shut. He held it until steel cut the view. The first early morning arrived grey and quiet, the city still rubbing sleep from its eyes. The lobby guard waved Sweary through with a nod. Upstairs, the executive floor hummed at half volume. Adrian stood at the window when she entered his office. No jacket, white shirt open at the throat, cuffs unbuttoned. The sight was an ache waiting for a name. Coffee? He asked. I'm fine, she said. She wasn't fine. They stood shoulder to shoulder over a table of printouts, close enough to share breath. She tapped a figure with her pen. This department is dropping output because the lead's been rotated 3 times in 6 months. Choose someone and back them. He leaned in, the clean scent of him skimming her edges. Who? She didn't step away. Marta Reyes. Steady, respected, under-promoted. He nodded. Thoughtful. Done. You're deciding that fast. I hired you to see what I can't. When you're that sure, I listen. Her chest warmed, a mix of pride and something softer. People had taken her work before, dressed it up, claimed it. He just acted. Thank you. His gaze dipped to her mouth before returning to her eyes. It was a second, maybe less. An arrow finds its target faster than that. You said no one sees you, she murmured, surprised at her own boldness. Maybe you don't let them. And do I let you? He asked, a breath of a question. That depends, she said, on whether you want to be seen or just admired. He exhaled, almost a laugh without sound. Careful, Miss Blake. About what? She asked. About how close you're getting. She finally stepped back, not because she wanted distance, but because the floor rules mattered. We should keep to the work. His nod was slow, respectful, frustratingly gentle. We should. They did. On paper. In the spaces between sentences, something else grew. A rhythm. An ease. A warmth that didn't ask permission. 2 days later, a rainstorm broke the afternoon into liquid silver. A power flicker hiccuped through the tower. In the hushed dim, the elevator stalled between floors with a soft shudder. It was just the two of them. Sweary's hand found the rail. Adrian hit the call button. "We're fine," he told maintenance. "Take your time." The lights steadied to an amber glow. The tiny car felt too intimate for the 1,000 unsaid words between them. "I don't like being trapped," she admitted, steady voice hiding a racing heartbeat. "I know," he said, surprising her. "Your first day here, you stood closer to the door than the table. Exit in your eyeline." She looked at him. "You noticed that?" "I notice you." The sentence landed between them like heat. She answered without meaning to. "I notice you too." Silence. Then a low confession. "I think about you," he said, keeping his eyes on the seam where doors met. "At night. I try not to. It doesn't work." Her throat tightened. "You can't say that to me." "I know." He turned toward her and stopped at a respectful distance, palms open, as if showing he was unarmed. "Tell me to forget you, and I'll try." She could have. She didn't. She stared at his open hands, the veins on his wrist, the restraint in his shoulders. "There's a clause," she said softly. "And there's my life. I've built it with guardrails. I won't push you," he said, voice rough now. "But I won't lie to you either." The elevator lurched back to life. She grabbed the rail. He didn't touch her, didn't use the excuse. He just stood, jaw tight, eyes on her face like he'd memorized it. When the doors opened, they walked out side by side, neither speaking, both changed. That evening, HR pinged her with a routine reminder about policy. She typed back a courteous acknowledgement, closed the laptop, and pressed her palm to her chest until the rhythm steadied. She could protect her name, her work, her hard-won freedom. She could. Her phone buzzed, an unsaved number. "You left your notebook on the conference table." "Ah." She stared at the screen. He'd texted without presumption, no emojis, no after-hours invitation, just a practical note with a thread of care woven through it. "Thank you. I'll pick it up in the morning. SB." 3 dots blinked, disappeared, blinked again. "It's on my assistant's desk. I didn't read it." "Ah, I know," she typed, then paused, deleted it, wrote instead, "Appreciated." Her thumb hovered. She added nothing else. She set the phone face down and paced the quiet apartment. The lavender candle, the stack of books, the notes she'd taped to the wall. "Keep your peace. Choose with intention. Don't let fear choose for you." She had written those for seasons like this. Her reflection in the window looked back, a capable woman, soft eyes that confessed what her mouth wouldn't. She closed the blinds. Across town, Adrian stood in the shadow of his own glass, phone in hand, every message he didn't send crowding his chest. "Sleep well. I'm trying to do the right thing. Tell me that I'm not imagining this." He typed, "None of it." He turned off the screen and leaned his forehead to the cool pane, the city's glow fading to a softer ache. The next morning, they met in a smaller project room. 4 chairs, a long table, a whiteboard crowded with arrows. Work should have swallowed them whole. It didn't. They debated a plan, voices low, close. She challenged him on the pace of a transition. He pushed back with supply chain realities. It was the cleanest kind of argument. 2 sharp minds meeting in the middle until the middle looked better than either end. When they finished, they were both flushed with the thrill of something built together. She laughed, unguarded, the kind of laugh that tastes like sunlight. His face changed, softer, younger, a man savoring a sound he didn't know he'd been starving for. "Don't look at me like that," she said, breathless. "How am I looking at you? Like you're memorizing me." He didn't deny it. "Maybe I am." She gathered her papers, fingers only slightly unsteady. "Boundaries," she whispered, reminding them both. He nodded, eyes sincere. "Boundaries." Neither moved. He tucked his hands into his pockets to keep from reaching for her. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said about listening to you. Marta's promotion is going through. The department will hear today." She stilled, then smiled, soft and proud, something warm blooming through the careful distance. "That will change lives, Adrian." He heard his name on her tongue and had to close his eyes for a second to steady himself. "That's the point." They stood there in the quiet, The wordless kind, where everything essential had already been said, and nothing dangerous had been done. "Thank you," she murmured. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just keep seeing what I miss." She nodded. "I will." As she moved toward the door, he stepped aside, letting her pass first. His nearness brushed her shoulder, not a touch, but a spark all the same. At the threshold she paused. "This, whatever this is, isn't allowed," he finished. "It isn't wise," she corrected gently. He gave the smallest smile. "Wise has never made my heart beat like this." Her lips parted, then pressed into a line. "We'll keep it clean. We'll try," he said, honest as ever. She left before the honesty unraveled them. That night, the city lifted a soft wind through the streets. Sweary took the long way home, passing a quiet park where yellow leaves skated along the path. She sat on a bench and let herself feel it, the want, the fear, the temptation woven with tenderness. Not the kind that demanded, but the kind that waited, the kind that offered. Her phone buzzed again. A photo this time, no caption. A cropped image of a whiteboard corner from the project room, her notes. His handwriting circling one of her lines with a check mark beside it. He'd written yes, no name, no flirtation, a stamp of respect in ink. She stared at the picture a long time, then let her head fall back and closed her eyes. The wind moved through the trees like a soft hush. "I see you," she whispered to no one, maybe to her own reflection, maybe to him. When she opened her eyes, the sky had bruised into evening. She stood, slid the phone into her pocket, and walked home with steady steps. She hadn't chosen him, he hadn't chosen her. But the choosing had already started anyway. Word of Sweary's sharp insights began to ripple quietly through the Holt Tower. Executives who once brushed her off now eyed her with a mixture of caution and respect. She had Adrian's ear, and in a world where proximity to him was power, that fact made her visible in dangerous ways. By Friday, the whispers started, a passing comment in the elevator, a smirk from a secretary who'd seen them in a late-night meeting. To outsiders, nothing had happened, but they could feel it, that something simmered beneath the surface. Sweary felt the weight of it. Every time she stepped into the building, she carried herself straighter, sharper, refusing to let the murmurs break her focus. But when she sat across from Adrian in his office with the door closed and sunlight slanting across his desk, her composure betrayed her in small ways, her heartbeat quickening, her pen tapping faster, her eyes darting to his lips when she shouldn't. One afternoon, after hours of debating restructuring strategies, Adrian leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "You know they're watching." She froze, her pen halfway to the page. "Who?" "My family, the board, everyone who thinks they own a piece of me. They notice when my attention lingers." Sweary swallowed, her throat tight, then stopped letting it linger. "I've tried." His voice dropped, softer now. "You make it impossible." The words hung heavy between them. Her chest rose with a sharp breath. She wanted to scold him, to remind him of her contract, the rules, her own life she'd worked too hard to protect. But instead, she whispered, "Don't say things you can't take back." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, gaze locked on hers. "And what if I don't want to take them back?" The air pressed close, charged with something neither of them had asked for but both of them craved. She stood abruptly, gathering her notes, needing to move before the walls between them broke. "I should go," she said. "Stay," he murmured, almost a plea. Her fingers tightened on her folder. "Adrian." His name on her tongue made him close his eyes briefly, as though savoring it. But when he opened them again, there was restraint in the storm of his gaze. "You're right. Go." She left quickly, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her chest burning. In the elevator down, she pressed her forehead to the cool glass and whispered to herself, "Boundaries, Sweary, boundaries." But boundaries felt weaker every time she said them. That night, Sweary worked late at her apartment, files spread across the table, tea cooling untouched at her elbow. The city hummed beyond her window, alive with nightlife, while she drowned in numbers and strategy. Her phone buzzed. It was another text from that unsaved number. Did you make it home safe? Ah. Her fingers hovered. It was simple, considerate, and dangerous. Yes, long day. Finishing the reports now. SB. The reply came almost instantly. Don't overwork. The reports can wait. She shook her head, half smiling despite herself. Easy for you to say. You have people to carry your load. I am the people. 3 dots blinked, then stopped, blinked again. Then let me carry some of it, even if it's just by reminding you to rest. Her chest tightened. She set the phone down, unwilling to type what her heart wanted to say. You already carry more than you should of me. Instead, she blew out the candle on her table and let the dark settle, though sleep would not come easily. Across the city, Adrian sat in his study, the bourbon untouched. His phone lay dark beside him. He told himself to stop, to let her live without his shadow looming. But his chest ached with the kind of hunger that had no cure. He pressed a hand over his heart, closing his eyes, whispering into the silence, "You weren't supposed to be mine." And yet, he never finished the sentence. The following Monday, they crossed paths in the lobby, unexpectedly. She was leaving. He was arriving. Their eyes locked in the swell of strangers. For a second, the crowd blurred away, and it was just them. Adrian stepped aside, letting her pass first, but his voice followed low and rough. We can't keep pretending this doesn't exist. Sweary's steps faltered. She didn't turn around, but her hand trembled against the strap of her bag. She whispered, barely audible, "Then don't pretend," and she walked out into the sun. Adrian stood frozen in the lobby, every instinct screaming that this was the moment. The pull had begun, and he knew with dangerous certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were an exercise in restraint. Adrian and Sweary moved through meetings like professionals, their voices steady, their expressions calm. To anyone else, nothing seemed unusual. But beneath the surface, every glance stretched too long, every brush of proximity carried heat, every silence between them screamed of what they weren't saying. It began with little things. She'd enter a room, and his eyes would find her immediately, even if 10 people were already seated. When she spoke, he leaned in as though her words were the only ones that mattered. When she laughed, a sound that slipped out unguarded, he would pause, his lips curving into something softer than anyone had seen from him in years. And she noticed everything about him, too. The way his voice dipped lower when he addressed her. The way his hand lingered just a fraction too long on the back of her chair when he pulled it out for her. The way his storm-grey eyes softened when no one else was watching. They told themselves it was nothing, that it would pass, but every day the invisible thread between them pulled tighter. One evening, after a long session reviewing reports, they found themselves walking out of the tower together. The sun had dipped, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Adrian's driver opened the sleek black car door, but Adrian paused, his gaze drifting to Sweary. "Let me take you home," he said quietly. Her heart stumbled. "That wouldn't be appropriate. Neither is me wanting to spend 5 more minutes with you," he murmured. Her breath caught. For a moment, she almost said yes, but she shook her head, forcing her voice steady. "I'll take the train." Adrian nodded, as though respecting her boundary, but his jaw tightened. He watched her walk away, her silhouette framed against the city lights, and he knew he was already too far gone. That night, his phone buzzed. A message from Sweary. "Thank you for not pressing." Adrian stared at it for a long moment, his chest aching with something raw. "I never want to be another chain for you," he typed back. "If you ever let me close, it will be because you chose it." He hit send before he could stop himself. Her reply came minutes later. "You make choosing feel dangerous." He exhaled sharply, pressing a hand over his mouth, as if the words were too much to take. "That's because it is," he typed back. "But sometimes, danger is the only honest thing left." She didn't answer after that. And yet, he lay awake half the night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. The following week, It grew harder to resist. During one meeting, they leaned together over a laptop screen, shoulders brushing. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through both of them. Sweary's pen slipped, scratching across the page, and Adrian's lips curved ever so slightly, as if he knew. At another point, she dropped a folder, papers scattering across the floor. Adrian crouched instantly, gathering the sheets. When their hands met over the last page, they froze. Their fingers touched, skin against skin, and neither pulled away immediately. The charge was undeniable, heavy in the air between them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Any time," he said, his voice husky. It was nothing. It was everything. Late nights became their undoing. One evening, Sweary stayed late in the project room, her hair falling loose as she scribbled notes across a whiteboard. She didn't hear him enter, but she felt him, his presence, his silence. "You should go home," Adrian said softly from the doorway. She turned, startled. "So should you." He stepped closer, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled. In the dim light, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man stripped bare of his armor. "I couldn't leave," he admitted, voice low. "Not while you were still here." Her heart pounded. "Adrian." He stopped just a step away, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. His eyes searched hers, stormy and vulnerable all at once. "I know the rules," he whispered. "I know what's at stake. But when I'm near you, none of it feels bigger than this." Her breath trembled. "You can't say things like that." "Then tell me to stop." His gaze was pleading now, his restraint fraying. "Tell me to walk away, and I will." She opened her mouth, ready to say the words, but they caught in her throat. Because the truth was, she didn't want him to stop. The silence between them throbbed. Electric. She could feel it. The pull, the inevitability. But before either of them could cross the line, Sweary stepped back, forcing air into her lungs. "We should end this conversation." Adrian's jaw clenched, but he nodded. For now. And though they left the room separately, they carried the weight of that moment with them, heavy and unshakable. The invisible thread between them grew tighter with every passing day. Adrian and Sweary moved through meetings as if nothing had changed. Their conversations strictly professional, their tones perfectly measured. But beneath the polished surfaces, everything was changing. Each word between them carried an undercurrent, each glance lingered too long, and each silence pulsed with the ache of what neither dared say aloud. It was dangerous, and they both knew it. It began with stolen glances. Adrian would sit at the head of the conference table, a dozen executives around him, yet his eyes always found her. Sweary would feel it before she saw it, the weight of his gaze, the heat of it. When she lifted her head from her notes, their eyes would lock, just for a second too long, before she looked away. It wasn't just him. She found herself noticing everything about him, the way he adjusted his cufflinks when he was restless, the faint crease in his brow when he was deep in thought, the curve of his lips when a rare smile broke through his guarded exterior. She told herself it was nothing, but her heart told another story, beating faster every time he was near. Then came the accidental touches. One morning, they leaned over the same laptop screen, their shoulders brushing. The contact lasted only a second, but it was enough to send her breath faltering. Adrian didn't move away. Neither did she. Another time, her folder slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the floor. Adrian crouched beside her instantly, his fingers brushing hers as they reached for the same page. Their hands lingered, just long enough for the air between them to thicken, before she pulled back, her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she whispered, flustered. "Any time," he replied, his voice rougher than he intended. It was nothing, and yet it was everything. At night, their restraint unraveled in quieter ways. The first message had been simple. "Did you make it home safe?" From Adrian, his name unsaved on her phone. She had stared at it for long minutes, her chest tightening before typing back, "Yes. Long day. Finishing the reports now. Don't overwork." "The reports can wait," he replied. She had smiled, despite herself. Easy for you to say. You have people to carry your load. I am the people. There was a pause. Then let me carry some of it, even if it's just by reminding you to rest. Her fingers had hovered over the screen, her heart aching with words she couldn't send. You already carry too much of me. Instead, she sent nothing. But she thought about him long into the night. And he thought of her, lying awake in his penthouse, staring at his phone, resisting the urge to type what burned on his tongue. I miss you. Late nights became their undoing. One evening, the office was nearly empty. Sweary stayed behind in the project room, scribbling notes across the whiteboard, her hair falling loose around her face. She didn't hear the door open, but she felt him before she saw him. You should go home, Adrian said softly, stepping inside. She turned, startled. So should you. He moved closer, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled to his forearms. The harshness of the day had faded from him, leaving only the man beneath the armor. I couldn't leave, he admitted, his voice low. Not while you were still here. Her heart stuttered. Adrian. He stopped just a step away, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the clean spice of his cologne. His eyes held hers, stormy and unguarded. I know the rules, he whispered. I know what's at stake. But when I'm near you, none of it feels bigger than this. Her breath trembled. You can't say things like that. Then tell me to stop, he murmured. His voice was ragged now, his restraint fraying. Tell me to walk away, and I will. She opened her mouth, ready to speak the words, but they wouldn't come. Because the truth was, she didn't want him to stop. The silence between them grew taut, charged. He leaned closer, slowly, as if giving her every chance to pull away. His hand brushed the edge of the whiteboard, dangerously close to hers. Her pulse thundered. She could feel the moment tilting, could almost taste the kiss that hovered just beyond reach. But at the very last second, she stepped back, breaking the spell. We should end this conversation. Adrian's jaw clenched, his chest rising with a sharp breath. Then he nodded, his voice rough. For now. They left the room separately, but neither slept that night. The pull grew stronger. At lunch breaks, they found themselves in the same places, sometimes by chance, sometimes not. A glance across a crowded cafe, a shared elevator ride, where silence was louder than words. One afternoon, a storm knocked out the power for a few minutes. The elevator stalled, trapping them together in the dim amber glow of backup lights. Sweary gripped the rail, her heart racing. I don't like being trapped. Adrian's gaze swept to her, steady. I know. She blinked. How? The first day you came, you sat closer to the door than the table. Exit in your eye line. People who hate cages always do that. Her lips parted. You notice that? I notice you. The words hit harder than he intended. She swallowed, her pulse quickening. You shouldn't. I can't help it. The air between them was molten. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her, right there in that tiny space. Consequences be damned. She wanted him to, but the elevator jolted back to life, and the doors opened too soon. They stepped out without a word, their bodies burning with what had almost happened. And then came the call. It was past midnight when her phone buzzed. Adrian's name flashed across the screen. She hesitated, then answered. Sorry. His voice came low and rough through the line. I shouldn't be calling this late. Her heart squeezed. Then why did you? Silence. Then because I can't stop thinking about you. She closed her eyes, clutching the phone tighter. Adrian. I know it's wrong, he whispered. I know we're not supposed to cross this line. But tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me this pull isn't tearing you apart the same way it's tearing me. Her breath caught. The truth burned on her tongue, begging to be released. But instead she whispered, We can't do this. I know, he said softly. But I had to hear your voice. Neither hung up. They stayed on the line in silence, listening to each other breathe, until sleep finally pulled them under. By the end of that week, the forbidden pull was no longer something they could deny. It wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. Every time their hands brushed, every time their eyes locked, every time silence stretched too long, the line between them thinned. They were standing on the edge, trembling with the knowledge that once they crossed, nothing would ever be the same. And deep down, both of them knew they would cross it. It was only a matter of when. The pull had reached breaking point. For weeks, Adrian and Sweary had danced around the fire, pretending it didn't burn, convincing themselves they were strong enough to resist. But desire is patient. It waits in every silence, grows in every glance, sharpens in every brush of fingers. And now, neither of them could ignore it. It began on a Friday evening. The office had emptied, the halls quiet, the city outside alive with weekend laughter. Sweary remained behind, double-checking a set of reports. She told herself it was dedication. The truth, she didn't want to leave yet because she knew Adrian was still there. His office door opened softly. She looked up to see him standing in the doorway, jacket slung over his arm, tie loosened, shirt open at the throat. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of unspoken words filled the space between them. "You should go home," he said at last. His voice was low, but not stern, gentle, almost reluctant. "I was about to," she replied, though her fingers still clutched the papers. He stepped inside, placing his jacket on the chair. "You've done enough for today. Let me drive you." Her chest tightened. "That's not wise." His storm-grey eyes held hers. "Since when have I been wise when it comes to you?" Her breath caught. She looked down, trying to hide the heat in her cheeks, but when she raised her head again, he was closer. Close enough that she could feel his presence press against her skin like warmth from a flame. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice a warning and a plea all at once. He lifted a hand slowly, carefully, as if afraid she'd bolt. His fingers brushed a stray curl from her cheek. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, "and I will." She should have. She knew she should have. But the word never left her lips. Instead, she leaned into his touch, and in that fragile, dangerous moment, the dam between them broke. His mouth found hers in a kiss that was both gentle and desperate, as though he had waited a lifetime for this. It wasn't the kiss of a man used to getting everything he wanted. It was the kiss of a man terrified of losing the one thing he couldn't buy. Sweary's hands clutched his shirt, pulling him closer. The papers fell forgotten to the floor. His arms wrapped around her, unyielding, yet tender as if she were the most precious thing he had ever held. The kiss deepened, sweet turning into something hotter, hungrier. Weeks of restraint poured out in the press of lips, the sweep of tongues, the shuddering breaths they shared between gasps. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "God, Sweary, I tried so hard not to want you." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "And now?" His eyes searched hers, dark with need, soft with something deeper. "Now I don't care about the rules. I just care about you." They didn't leave the office that night. Adrian dimmed the lights, shutting out the world. In the glow, he kissed her again and again, each kiss more urgent than the last. His hands traced her face, her shoulders, her waist, but always with reverence, never with greed. She responded with equal fire, her fingers threading through his hair, her body leaning into his as if it had always belonged there. It wasn't just passion. It was release. Weeks of aching glances, of silent restraint, of boundaries whispered in the dark. All of it ignited in that room. When at last they pulled apart, breathless, Sweary pressed her hands against his chest. "This can't happen again." He caught her wrists gently, holding her hands against his heartbeat. "Then why does it feel like it has to?" She shook her head, torn between fear and longing. "Because it's forbidden. Because it could destroy everything." "Then let it," he said, his voice fierce. "What's the point of having everything if I can't have you?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw not just desire but truth. And she knew she was already his, whether she admitted it or not. The following days blurred into something dangerous and beautiful. In public, they were careful. Meetings were professional. Conversations clipped. But in private, when the door closed, restraint melted. A brush of hands over a document, lips grazing when passing papers, whispered confessions when no one else could hear. One evening, he found her in the project room, exhausted, her head bent over charts. He stepped behind her, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. She stiffened, then melted under his touch. "You push yourself too hard," he murmured. "I have to," she whispered back. "Not when I'm here," he said. His lips brushed the crown of her head. She closed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking deep. For once, she allowed herself to lean back, to let someone else carry her for a moment. But the world was not blind. Whispers grew louder. A secretary caught a glance too long. A junior executive noticed Adrian's unusual softness when speaking to Sweary. Rumors trickled through the halls, quiet but poisonous. And the first warning arrived. Sweary was called into HR again. The director's smile was polite but firm. "Miss Blake, I'm sure you're aware of our policies. Some concerns have been raised about appearances." Her stomach twisted. "Appearances? Your proximity to Mr. Holt. We're not accusing you of anything improper, of course, but perception matters. For your sake, and his, you should keep things strictly professional." Sweary left the office with her pulse hammering, her chest heavy with dread. That night, she confronted Adrian in his study. "They're watching us." "I know," he said simply. "Adrian, this can't continue. If they find out, let them," he interrupted, stepping closer. "I'm not afraid." "Well, I am," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I've built everything on my own, my reputation, my career. If I lose that—" His hands cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "You won't lose me." Tears pricked her eyes. "But what if that's not enough?" His lips brushed hers, soft, aching. "Then I'll fight harder. For you, for us." And, in that moment, as his kiss claimed her again, she realized she was already too far gone to walk away. For the first time in his life, Adrian felt alive. The empire, the wealth, the expectations, they all faded in her presence. She gave him something he had never known: love that wasn't bought, intimacy that wasn't performance, truth that wasn't filtered. And for Sweary, he was both her greatest danger and her sweetest escape. She knew she was risking everything, her career, her peace, her future. But when he held her, when he whispered her name like a prayer, she couldn't make herself regret it. Because love, when it's forbidden, burns the brightest. And theirs had only just begun. Secrets have a way of leaking, no matter how tightly they're kept. For a while, Adrian and Sweary thought they could balance it. Professional by day, stolen moments by night. They convinced themselves their restraint was enough to keep suspicions at bay. But the truth is, people always notice when a man like Adrian Holt changes. And he had changed. It started with the staff. His assistant noticed first, the way Adrian's schedule shifted to accommodate Sweary. His project meetings, the way his tone softened when her name appeared on documents. Then the boardroom noticed, the unusual amount of attention given to her reports. The way Adrian dismissed objections if Sweary's voice carried confidence. Rumors brewed in the hallways. A secretary whispered, "Have you seen the way he looks at her?" Another replied, "He's Adrian Holt. He doesn't look at anyone like that." By the time whispers reached the ears of Holt family loyalists, it was no longer speculation. It was a scandal waiting to break. Sweary felt it first, the shift in how people treated her. Polite smiles tightened into judgment. Conversations stilled when she walked past. A project manager, once friendly, now gave curt replies, his eyes sharp with silent accusation. One morning, an anonymous email appeared in her inbox. "Careful who you play with. The Holt name isn't a ladder, it's a trap." Her stomach twisted. She deleted it instantly, but the words burned. That evening, she told Adrian, "They're watching me," she whispered, pacing his study as city lights spilled across the glass walls. Emails, looks, whispers. I can feel it. "Adrian, this isn't safe." He rose from his chair, his jaw tight. "Safe? Since when did I promise you safe? I promised you the truth. I promised you I wouldn't let you carry this alone. Her chest ached. You can't shield me from everything. Your family, your empire, they'll destroy me if they find out. He crossed the room, taking her hands, pressing them against his chest, where his heart beat hard. Then let them come for me. Let them strip me bare. I don't care, Sweary. I'd rather lose everything than lose you. Her eyes blurred with tears. Don't say that. Why not? His voice cracked. It's the only thing that feels real. She silenced him with a kiss, desperate and trembling, because she couldn't bear the weight of his devotion and the danger it carried. But the danger arrived sooner than either expected. Adrian's father summoned him to the estate. The Holt patriarch was a man of iron, decades of empire etched into his every line, his eyes sharp as blades. You've been careless, his father said coldly, pacing the study. Associates talk, staff whisper. You parade this consultant in front of us as though she's one of us. Adrian met his father's glare, unflinching. She's not a consultant, she's brilliant. She saved divisions your board wanted to bury. She deserves respect. What she deserves, his father snapped, is distance. You will end this before it taints the Holt name. Adrian's voice dropped, low and dangerous. And if I don't? His father's lips curled into a thin smile. Then she will pay the price, not you. Her. Adrian's blood ran hot, fury crackling through him. Touch her, and I swear. You'll do nothing, his father cut in. Because deep down, you know she's replaceable. The Empire isn't. Adrian stormed out before he lost control, his chest heaving. For the first time in years, he wanted to throw everything away, every deal, every fortune, if it meant keeping Sweary safe. Sweary felt the fallout days later. A project she'd been leading was suddenly reassigned. Invitations to strategy meetings vanished from her calendar. HR requested a routine review of her contract. And then came the confrontation. Clarissa, the woman chosen for Adrian, polished and perfect, appeared in the project room one afternoon. Her smile was sharp, her perfume suffocating. You're Sweary Blake, she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. The consultant. Sweary straightened. Yes. Clarissa's eyes swept her, slow and condescending. I see why he's distracted. You're lovely, in an ordinary sort of way. Sweary's stomach tightened, but her voice stayed calm. If you came here to insult me, don't waste your time. Clarissa's smile sharpened. I came to warn you. Adrian belongs to this world. He belongs to me. Don't mistake his rebellion for permanence. When the dust settles, you'll be the one left in pieces. She left without waiting for an answer, her heels clicking like a gavel striking judgment. Sweary sank into the chair, her chest heavy, her hands trembling despite her resolve. She had fought her whole life to stand tall, but Clarissa's words cut deep because part of her feared they were true. That night, Adrian found her on her apartment balcony, the city sprawling below. You're pulling away, he said quietly. I'm protecting myself, she replied, not meeting his eyes. Adrian, your world doesn't forgive, and I can't spend my life being the woman they whisper about in hallways. He stepped closer, his hand brushing her arm. Then let them whisper. Let them scream. I'll give them something to talk about. Tears stung her eyes. You don't understand. I can survive losing a job. I can survive judgment. But I can't survive losing myself. And right now, being with you feels like I'm fighting a war I can't win. His chest broke at her words. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Then I'll fight it for you. I'll fight every battle, take every blow, if it means keeping you. She buried her face against his chest, torn between love and fear. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe love could be stronger than an empire. But in the back of her mind, the warnings echoed, it isn't safe. It isn't wise. You weren't supposed to be his, and so the whispers grew louder, the threats sharper. Their love burned brighter, but the shadows around them closed in. Because forbidden love always comes at a cost, and soon they would be forced to pay it. Love, no matter how fierce, cannot live forever in shadows. For weeks, Adrian and Sweary had balanced on the knife's edge, clinging to each other in stolen moments, while the world closed in around them. But the whispers had become accusations, and the warnings had hardened into ultimatums. The Empire demanded obedience, and their hearts demanded defiance. Something had to break. The breaking point came at a family gathering. The Holt estate gleamed that evening. Crystal chandeliers, gilded walls, guests in silks and tailored suits. Adrian had been summoned under the pretense of important announcements, but he knew better. When he arrived, his father stood at the head of the table, flanked by his mother and Clarissa. The message was clear before a single word was spoken. "Adrian," his father began, voice heavy with authority, "this family has tolerated your distraction long enough. It ends tonight. Clarissa is the woman you will marry. The arrangements are already in place." The room stilled. Adrian's jaw tightened. "No." His father's eyes blazed. "This is not a request." Adrian's voice was low, steady, and dangerous. "You can control the Empire. You can control the money. But you don't control my heart." Gasps rippled through the guests. Clarissa's smile faltered, replaced by a glare sharp enough to cut glass. His father leaned forward, his voice a blade. "If you walk away from this family's choice, understand this, your woman will be ruined. We will destroy her career, her reputation, her peace. She will regret the day she ever met you." Adrian's breath caught. Fury roared through him, but fear pierced deeper. They wouldn't hesitate. They had the power to make good on their threats. For the first time, he felt powerless, not for himself, but for Sweary. That night, he went to her apartment. She opened the door, relief flooding her face at the sight of him. But one look at his expression, and her relief faltered. "What happened?" she whispered. Adrian stepped inside, his hands trembling as he reached for her. He kissed her fiercely, desperately, as though trying to memorize her. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet, his voice raw. "They know, Sweary, and they'll destroy you if I don't end this." Her stomach dropped. "End this?" He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks like fragile porcelain. "I love you. God, I love you more than I've ever loved anything. But if I keep you, they'll take everything from you. I can't let that happen." Her chest cracked open. "So you're choosing them? You're choosing duty over us?" "No," he said fiercely. "I'm choosing you. I'm choosing to protect you, even if it kills me to let you go." Tears streamed down her face. She pushed his hands away, her voice breaking. "Don't you dare make this sound noble, Adrian. You're breaking us. You're breaking me." His lips trembled. "I know. And I'll hate myself for it every day." She sobbed, clutching his shirt, her forehead pressed to his chest. "Please, don't do this. We can fight. We can survive this." His arms tightened around her, his body shaking with the force of holding back. "If it were just me, I'd burn it all to the ground. But they'll come for you, Sweary, and I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't watch them hurt you." Her hands fell away. She stepped back, her face shattered. "So this is it?" His silence was the answer. She nodded slowly, her voice hollow. "Then go. Before I beg you to stay." He reached for her once more, then stopped, his hand trembling in the air before falling uselessly to his side. He turned and walked out, each step heavier than the last. Sweary collapsed to the floor the moment the door closed, her sobs filling the empty apartment. Adrian drove into the night, his vision blurred, his chest hollow. He had never felt so rich and yet so utterly impoverished. Days turned into weeks. Adrian buried himself in work, moving through boardrooms like a machine. He was colder now, sharper, his smiles gone, his heart encased in armor. The world thought him stronger, but those closest noticed the truth. He was hollow. Sweary rebuilt herself brick by brick. She poured her pain into her work, taking new clients, expanding her portfolio. She refused to let the Holts break her. But every success tasted bittersweet, because every victory reminded her of the man she had lost. At night, Adrian stared at his ceiling, replaying her tears. At dawn, Sweary stared at her reflection, reminding herself to keep standing. Both lived, but neither truly lived. Their love had been torn apart, not by choice, but by fear. And yet, even in the silence, they couldn't escape each other. Adrian still kept her notebook in his desk, unopened, but never returned. Sweary still kept the text he had sent, "Tell me to forget you and I'll try," saved in her phone, unread but never deleted. They were broken. But they were not gone, because some loves, no matter how forbidden, refuse to die. Love, once torn apart, leaves echoes. Some fade quickly, others linger like ghosts, haunting every step. For Adrian Holt and Sweary Blake, the echoes were deafening. For Adrian, life went on, but it was lifeless. The Holt empire thrived. Deals were signed, markets conquered, and board members applauded his efficiency. From the outside, he looked like the perfect heir, sharp, decisive, relentless. But beneath the polished surface, he was hollow. The man who once craved freedom now lived like a prisoner of his own making. His laughter disappeared, his charm dulled. His days became cycles of work and silence, contracts and solitude. At night, he poured bourbon into a crystal glass and stared out across the glittering city. It was the same view he had looked upon 1,000 times, but now it mocked him. He had once wished for someone to see him, to love him beyond the Holt name. He had found her, and then he had let her go. Sometimes he replayed her last words. "Please, don't do this. We can fight." The way her voice cracked haunted him, the way her tears had burned into his shirt. He told himself he had done it for her safety, but late at night he wondered if he had been a coward. He still kept her notebook in his desk drawer. He never opened it, but some nights he lay his hand on the leather cover as though it were a lifeline. Sweary, meanwhile, rebuilt her life piece by piece. The first days were agony. She would wake with swollen eyes, her pillow damp, her body heavy with loss. She forced herself out of bed anyway, forced herself into routines, forced herself to survive. Work became her anchor. She took on new clients, poured her energy into strategies, and traveled to companies that sought her brilliance. Word spread quickly. Sweary Blake was more than a consultant. She was a force. She rose earlier, worked later, built walls around her heart with brick and steel. When colleagues whispered about Adrian Holt, she smiled tightly and redirected the conversation. She refused to let his name break her in public, even if it shattered her in private. Her friends noticed the change. She laughed less, dated no one, and avoided conversations about love. When pressed, she simply said, "I don't have time for distractions," but alone, in the quiet of her apartment, she sometimes reached for her phone, scrolling back to the texts she had never deleted. "Tell me to forget you, and I'll try." She never had. She couldn't. Time stretched, carving scars into both of them. Adrian grew sharper, learning humility in silence. For the first time in his life, he questioned everything: the empire, the wealth, the family name. What good was legacy if it left him empty? He began showing up at the factories, speaking to workers his father ignored. He listened more, ordered less. Slowly, he learned that power without compassion was nothing but chains. Sweary grew stronger. Her heartbreak hardened into resilience. She started mentoring young women in business, sharing her story of fighting for a place at the table. She didn't tell them about Adrian, but she taught them about strength, about surviving storms without losing themselves. Both were hurting. Both were growing. Months passed. Seasons shifted. And yet, their connection never died. One evening, at a gala Sweary had been invited to speak at, she felt it before she saw him. The weight of a gaze she knew too well. She turned, and across the crowded room, Adrian stood. He looked the same, yet different. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes were heavier, lined with the pain of months without her. For a moment, the world blurred away, leaving only the two of them locked in silent recognition. Sweary's chest tightened, but she looked away quickly, forcing herself back into her speech. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Adrian watched her from a distance, his heart twisting. She looked radiant, stronger, untouchable. And he realized then that though he had lost her, he had also set her free. In their separate worlds, they carried each other like shadows. Adrian's nights were haunted by what-ifs. Sweary's days were fueled by the memory of a love she had lost, but refused to regret. And slowly, painfully, they both transformed. He became a man less defined by legacy, more by humanity. She became a woman less defined by survival, more by choice. Their love had broken them, but it had also remade them. And though they didn't know it yet, fate was already writing the next chapter. A chapter of defiance, reunion, and a love strong enough to challenge everything. Because some love stories are not meant to end in pain. They are meant to rise from it. Some loves are fragile, breaking under the weight of the world. Others are forged in fire, surviving storms and scars until nothing can destroy them. Adrian and Sweary had been torn apart by fear, reshaped by pain, and tempered by growth. But destiny wasn't finished with them yet. Their story wasn't meant to end in silence. It was meant to rise in defiance. It began with a choice. Adrian had spent months watching his empire grow even as his soul withered. He had obeyed his father's ultimatums, worn the mask of the perfect heir, and endured the emptiness of boardrooms and alliances. But every contract signed felt hollow. Every banquet attended felt false. One night, staring out at the city from his penthouse, he whispered, aloud, "What's the point of all this if I can't breathe without her?" The silence offered no answer, but his heart did. He couldn't live in chains any longer. Meanwhile, Sweary had carved her own path. Her consultancy flourished, her reputation soared, and her independence had never been stronger. Yet no matter how much success she achieved, a part of her heart remained restless. She told herself she had moved on. She told her friends she was fine. But deep down she knew some part of her would always belong to Adrian Holt. When invitations to another Holt Gala landed in her inbox, this time not as a guest but as a featured speaker on corporate ethics, she almost declined. But something in her whispered, "Go. Stand tall. Let them see who you've become." So she went. The gala glittered with wealth and power. Chandeliers sparkled above, orchestras played softly, and the Holt family presided at the center of it all. Sweary arrived in an elegant gown of deep emerald silk, her hair swept back, her eyes steady. Conversations paused as she entered, whispers rippling through the crowd. Some looked at her with admiration, others with scorn, but she walked with quiet grace, her heels clicking like thunder across marble floors. Adrian saw her the moment she arrived. His breath caught, his chest tightening. She was radiant, stronger than before, more untouchable, yet still the woman who had undone him with a single glance. Their eyes met across the room. The world fell away. His father noticed too. He leaned toward Adrian, his voice like ice. "You will not embarrass this family again. Do you understand?" Adrian stood slowly, his storm-grey eyes hard. "No, father. What I understand is that I've been living your life, not mine, and I'm done." Gasps rippled through the table. His father's face reddened. "Don't you dare." But Adrian was already moving. He crossed the room with purposeful strides, every eye following him, every whisper sharpening. Sweary turned as he approached, her breath catching. "Adrian," she whispered, half in warning, half in disbelief. He stopped in front of her, the entire hall watching, and took her hand. His voice carried across the room, strong and unflinching. "I've spent my life chained to duty, to an empire built on fear. But tonight, I choose love. I choose you, Sweary Blake, and I don't care who hears it." A stunned silence fell. Sweary's eyes widened, tears welling as her heart raced. "Adrian, what are you doing?" Finally, he said, his voice breaking with honesty, "What I should have done all along." And in front of the Holt family, the board, and every guest, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It wasn't just a kiss. It was defiance. It was freedom. It was love that had survived every attempt to kill it, blazing brighter for every scar. The room erupted. Some gasped in scandal, others whispered in awe. Clarissa stormed out in fury. His father's fists clenched, his mother's pearls trembled against her chest. But Adrian didn't care. For the first time in his life, he didn't care. All he cared about was the woman in his arms, kissing him back with a fire that proved she had never stopped loving him either. Later, away from the crowd, they stood on the balcony, the city glowing below. Adrian held her hands, his voice raw. "I was a coward before. I let fear take you from me. I'll never make that mistake again. I don't care if it costs me the empire, the fortune, the name. None of it matters if I don't have you." Sweary's tears slid down her cheeks, but her smile was radiant. "Adrian, do you know what you just did? You threw your world away." "No," he whispered, brushing a tear from her face. "I finally found it." Her lips trembled. "And what if they come for me again? What if the whispers never stop?" "Then let them whisper," he said fiercely, "because I'll be beside you. Always." She laughed through her tears, pressing her forehead to his. "You're impossible, and you're mine," he said softly. "Finally." Truly. They kissed again, slower this time, sweeter, savoring the peace that followed the storm. From that night on, everything changed. Adrian stepped down from some of his family's demands, carving his own path with Sweary by his side. He rebuilt parts of the empire with compassion, valuing people as much as profits. For the first time, he was not just a Holt. He was Adrian, a man defined not by legacy, but by love. Sweary flourished too, no longer shadowed by fear. With Adrian's support, and her own brilliance, she expanded her influence, mentoring others and proving that love and strength were not opposites, but allies. Together, they became a symbol, not of scandal, but of courage, not of ruin, but of redemption. Their love had been forbidden. It had been torn, tested, and scarred. But in the end, it had triumphed. Because true wealth is not in fortune. It's in the courage to love when it's forbidden. And Adrian and Sweary had found the courage, together. And that, dear friends, is where Adrian and Sweary's journey ends, not in fear, but in the courage to love against all odds. Until next time, thank you for watching. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story here on Mr. Leonardo Stories.